They hated everything. They thought I was a loser. How come I was 30 and still wasn't married? Wasn't Ed Asner's character Jewish? What about Rhoda? Why is she so mean to Mary? All of that stuff.
It's wonderful stuff, and I'm not crediting myself. I mean, this just happens. He has obviously laid it out in such a way that he wants the actor's input, and it just becomes a recognizable exaggeration of truth.
I wanted to have the ability to express myself, whether as an actress or as a dancer or as a singer. And I didn't really train in acting, but in dancing and singing I did.
For 40 years, Mary Tyler Moore said nothing. She smiled through interviews. She dodged the questions about Dick Van Dyke. She let people wonder. Then, in 2003, she finally spoke. What she admitted shocked everyone. It wasn't what people expected to hear. It was worse. She called it a terrible waste. Those 3 words changed everything fans thought they knew about television's most beloved couple. The chemistry was real. The feelings were real. But what actually happened between takes? And why did she wait until she was 67 to finally tell the truth? Mary Tyler Moore looked like the kind of woman who must have come from comfort. The smile, the calm voice, the polished charm, it all felt like it had always been there. But when you go back to the start, you do not find glamour. You find a tight apartment, thin paychecks, and a home that could switch from quiet to chaos in a second. She was born on December 29, 1936, in Brooklyn Heights, New York. Not in a world of fancy parties, but in a working family trying to keep its head above water. Her father, George Tyler Moore, was an office clerk, and in the 1940s, he earned under $50 a week. That meant every week was a small puzzle of rent, food, and whatever surprise bill showed up next. They lived in places like Flatbush, Brooklyn, sometimes sharing space with relatives, and for a short time they rented in Flushing, Queens. The rooms were cramped. Winters could feel bitter, and even simple things like steady comfort were never guaranteed. Then the problem that mattered most was not money. It was what happened inside the home when the doors closed. Both her parents struggled with severe alcoholism. By the time Mary was around 7, the house could turn into a war zone. There were blackouts, shouting, and fights that seemed to come from nowhere, and end with fear sitting in the corners of every room. When it got too bad, child services stepped in more than once. Mary and her brother John, who was born in 1942, were sent to stay with aunts and uncles for weeks or even months. And later her sister Elizabeth would be born in 1956, entering a family that already carried deep cracks. One time in 1944, Mary spent time with her grandmother upstate, and the message she felt was simple and sharp. You can be sent away at any moment, and you might not know when you are coming back. That fear stays with a kid. It makes them listen for footsteps. It makes them study moods. It makes them learn how to disappear. Mary later wrote about hiding under beds during drunken rages. While other kids were thinking about school and play, she was thinking about survival. And slowly, she started building a plan in her mind. She would escape. If she could not control the noise at home, she would control what she could become outside it. Performance started to feel like a door, and she kept reaching for the handle. Even the street outside did not give her relief. In Flatbush, she lived in a neighborhood where many families were Orthodox Jewish, while her own family was Irish Catholic. That made her stand out, and not in a gentle way. She faced taunts from other kids, and some days they threw stones and called her names. Bruised knees and scraped legs became normal. And so did the feeling of being the only one. It fed a kind of insecurity that can last for years. At the same time, it also taught her something harsh and useful. When you are treated like an outsider, You either shrink or you learn to hold your ground. Mary kept learning to hold her ground, even while she hurt. Then something unexpected pulled the whole family across the country. An uncle, Barney Brown, worked as a talent agent, and he pushed them to move west. The idea was simple. California meant sun, jobs, and maybe a fresh start. So in 1945, they packed what they could and drove across the country on Route 66. By mid-July, they landed in Los Angeles and rented a small bungalow in Los Feliz for about $40 a month. It was a new city, new streets, new schools, and it looked like a clean page. But even with new palm trees outside, the old problems followed them inside. The drinking did not vanish just because the sky was brighter. Mary still had to live with tension and sudden blow-ups, and she still carried that old fear of being left behind. Yet now she was close to the world where dreams were made, and that mattered. Because when you are near Hollywood, even a struggling kid can start believing there is a way out. As she grew older, she found her escape with her body first, not with lines and scripts. Dance became her safe place. She went to Immaculate Heart High School in Los Feliz, and she threw herself into ballet and tap. She practiced constantly. She worked at it the way some people work at breathing, like stopping would make everything collapse. When the house felt too loud, she focused on steps. When her thoughts got too heavy, she turned to rhythm. Movement became a shield, and also a promise. If she kept getting better, maybe the world would finally see her for something other than the kid from a broken home. That hunger for a different life pushed her into work early. In 1955, when she was just 18 and barely out of high school, she landed her first paid acting job. It was not glamorous. It was strange and a little humiliating. She became Happy Hot Point, a tiny dancing elf in commercials for Hot Point appliances on The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet. They stuffed her into costumes shaped like stoves and refrigerators, covered her up completely, and had her bounce around selling kitchen dreams to the suburbs. Still, the paycheck felt like a miracle. She filmed dozens of commercials fast and earned $6,000 for a few days of work. Real money for a young woman trying to build a future. And right when that future seemed to open up, life swerved again. She married her next-door neighbor, Richard Meeker, a cranberry salesman who was about 10 years older. It happened fast, and for a moment, it probably felt like a rescue, like stability and love could finally replace the chaos she grew up in. But only weeks after the marriage, she got pregnant, and suddenly, her elf costume did not fit the same way. They tried to hide her changing body with tight undergarments, but the people in charge panicked. A pregnant elf did not match the image they wanted on screen, so they cut her loose. One minute she had work, the next minute she was out, and she was a young newlywed with a baby on the way. Her son, Richard Ritchie Meeker Jr., was born on July 3, 1956. Now she had auditions and diapers in the same day, and she was trying to keep a dream alive while learning how to be a mother. The marriage, instead of becoming her safe place, started to strain under pressure. As her career pulled her forward, it also pulled them apart. By the early 1960s, as her big break arrived, the relationship could not hold. They divorced around 1961 to 1962, right as her life on television began to explode. Before that explosion, though, she took another job that was famous for the oddest reason. On Richard Diamond, Private Detective, she played a character named Sam, but viewers did not see her face. They saw her legs. That was the gimmick. She sat behind a desk or stood out of frame, and the camera framed her from the waist down. It was a strange kind of attention, and it could have felt like another trap, another moment where she was reduced to a piece instead of a person. Still, she used it. She pushed for more pay when she felt the role was catching on, and when they fired her, she did not quietly disappear. She flipped the story by revealing herself to the press, letting the public learn that the mystery legs belonged to Mary Tyler Moore. That little move brought her real attention, and in Hollywood, attention can become oxygen. Then came the audition that changed everything. In 1961, she went up for the role of Laura Petrie on The Dick Van Dyke Show. She was in her early 20s, and Dick Van Dyke was older, and some people worried she was too young to play his wife. Even he questioned it at first, but she walked in with something that could not be taught. She had warmth, timing, and a spark that made the room feel lighter. She also did something bold. She stretched the truth about her age in the audition, trying to seem closer to what they wanted. When the truth came out, it could have ruined her. Instead, they laughed and kept her because they knew they had found the right person. The show began on October 3, 1961, and the pairing worked. People believed in them. They laughed with them. They rooted for them. And Mary, who had once been the kid hiding under a bed, was now the face millions welcomed into their living rooms. Still, even that bright set had shadows. Some co-stars were not instantly warm to her. There was tension, jealousy, and the quiet kind of cold that can make a young performer feel alone even in a crowded room. Mary had to learn how to smile through it and keep delivering. At the same time, she was also fighting for how her character would look. She wanted Laura Petrie to wear capri pants, not just dresses and pearls. Executives worried the pants were too revealing, too modern, too much. Mary pushed anyway because she wanted Laura to feel real. She wanted women to see someone moving around the house like an actual woman, not like a mannequin. The audience loved it, and the look spread. And another small piece of television changed because she refused to back down. On set, there was also the human side that fans did not see. There were giggling fits that ruined takes because the chemistry was real and the timing was so natural that it could spin out of control. There were rumors, too, because people always try to turn chemistry into scandal. But rumors are easy to start when two people light up a room together. What mattered more was the work. Week after week, she built her name with skill, not noise. After her first marriage ended, another major relationship began, and it did not start with a fairy tale. It started with a man who knew how to plan. Grant Tinker, a television executive, met her around that time. He pursued her steadily, sometimes too steadily, and even arranged moments that looked like business, but were meant to bring them closer. Eventually, she let him in, and they married on December 29, 1962, her birthday again. For a while, it became a powerful partnership, both personal and professional, and it led to something bigger than either of them alone. On October 12, 1999, Dick Van Dyke sat beside Mary Tyler Moore on Larry King Live, smiling the way he always did when they were together. And for a while, the interview felt like a friendly reunion between two old partners who had shared years of television history. Then the mood shifted in a quiet and unexpected way when Van Dyke turned toward her, looked straight into her eyes, and said something no one expected to hear. He told her he had a crush on her. The audience burst into laughter and applause, while Mary Tyler Moore blushed in a way that felt both shy and amused. And for a moment, the years seemed to fall away, as if they were back on the set again. It had been more than 30 years since their show ended, and neither of them had ever spoken so openly about their feelings before. She answered with a warm smile, and said their time together had always been filled with laughter and a strange kind of energy that everyone on the set could feel. During rehearsals, they would giggle so much that work often slowed down because no one could keep a straight face. Van Dyke nodded while she spoke and said their connection had always felt like pure luck, something that just happened without effort. Yet he made it clear that they never crossed any lines because both of them respected their marriages too much. The interview kept replaying on television afterward, and fans passed the clip around for years because it seemed to confirm what many had guessed all along. People who worked on the show later said the two of them often drifted off script and made each other laugh until filming had to stop. And director Carl Reiner once wrote in production notes that their natural chemistry saved scenes that might have fallen flat without them. The moment on live television showed a side of them that felt honest and human, something far different from the perfect couple viewers remembered from their show. After Mary Tyler Moore died on January 25, 2017, Van Dyke watched the interview again during a television appearance, and his voice shook as he said it was the most truthful conversation they had ever shared. Even many years later, he still returns to that moment because it reminds him of a kind of magic that cannot be recreated once it is gone. During that same interview, Mary Tyler Moore spoke in even clearer terms about what existed between them back in the early 1960s when they worked together every day. She said their bond carried a strong romantic feeling that showed itself in small ways during rehearsals, through glances and quiet touches that never appeared in the script. Visitors to the set sometimes assumed they were dating because their laughter came so easily, and Carl Reiner often had to explain that it was simply the spark that helped bring the show to life. Their scenes moved quickly because they understood each other's timing without effort, and what might have taken other actors many tries often worked almost right away for them. Years later, she said that working with him shaped her sense of comedy and made her a better performer because his talent pushed everyone around him to rise higher. Van Dyke later described their partnership as something close to mind reading because they always seemed to know what the other person would do next, and the rest of the cast joked that being around them felt less like work and more like a party that started fresh every morning. Even with all that closeness, their personal lives followed different paths, and both of them remained tied to their own marriages through the years of the show. Dick Van Dyke had married Margie Willett in 1948, long before fame arrived, and together they raised 4 children while he struggled with the pressures that came with sudden success. Mary Tyler Moore married young as well and had a son, but that marriage ended just before the show began, and soon after she married Grant Tinker, who would later become an important part of her professional life. Rumors started to circulate early on, so Carl Reiner insisted on clear professional boundaries to keep the work steady and the atmosphere calm. Despite long days together and the closeness that everyone noticed, nothing turned into an affair. Van Dyke later said his wife knew about the crush and trusted him, and Moore said her husband supported her career without jealousy. Their loyalty kept everything balanced and allowed the friendship to survive long after the cameras stopped rolling. When they reunited decades later for a stage production, the same spark was still there, familiar and effortless, as if time had only paused their story instead of ending it. A few years after the old show ended, Mary Tyler Moore began another chapter that would change television in a completely different way. On September 19, 1970, a new series introduced viewers to Mary Richards, a single woman in her 30s who chose independence instead of marriage, and stepped into a life built around work and friendship. At the time, this idea felt unusual, because television usually showed women as wives or mothers, yet Mary Richards lived alone in Minneapolis and worked as an associate producer at a television station while building a future on her own terms. Early on, network executives worried that audiences would reject the idea, and they pushed back against story ideas that felt too bold. They refused to let the character be a divorcee and blocked several ideas they believed might upset viewers. Yet the creators kept pressing forward because they believed the story reflected real-life changes happening across the country. The show found its audience anyway, and ratings kept climbing as more people recognized something honest in Mary's quiet determination. The famous opening scene where she tossed her hat into the air became a symbol of possibility, and for many viewers, it felt like a small declaration that a woman could shape her own life without apology. The series captured a moment when more women were entering college and the workforce, and the character of Mary Richards gave that shift a familiar face that people welcomed into their homes each week. As the show grew stronger, it began to touch subjects that television rarely discussed openly. Network executives worried about stories dealing with equal pay, relationships outside marriage, divorce, and other sensitive topics. Yet the writers continued to bring these issues into the scripts in ways that felt natural and human. One episode showed Mary learning she earned less than the man who held her job before her, and the conversation that followed made viewers face a reality many women already knew. Other episodes hinted at birth control, changing attitudes toward relationships, and the struggles people faced while trying to balance tradition with new freedoms. The audience responded with interest instead of outrage, and the series drew millions of viewers who kept coming back week after week. The success proved that honest stories could connect with people even when the subjects felt uncomfortable at first. Behind the scenes, a quiet change was taking place as well, because more women began joining the writing staff. By 1973, a large part of the creative team consisted of women who drew from their own lives when shaping stories. And their voices helped make the character of Mary Richards feel real instead of imagined. One of the leading writers rose to a senior role and earned major awards for scripts that mixed humor with genuine emotion. And the cast later said, these writers gave the show a depth that few comedies achieved during that time. The series went on to win a long list of awards and became known as one of the strongest comedies ever made. Year after year, it earned recognition for acting, writing, and directing, while audiences continued to follow Mary's journey. The final episode brought the cast together in a quiet farewell that felt more like a real goodbye than a television ending. And by then, the character of Mary Richards had already become part of cultural memory. Through the years, Mary Richards grew from a hopeful newcomer into a confident professional who earned greater responsibility at the station. Her rise matched the changes happening around her as women pushed for equal opportunity in workplaces across the country. By the time the series ended, she had become a full producer, a step that reflected both her personal growth and the wider movement toward equality that shaped the decade. Behind the confident smile, Mary Tyler Moore carried struggles that few people saw at the time. In 1969, just before her new show began, doctors discovered she had type 1 diabetes after a routine test revealed dangerously high blood sugar levels. The news frightened her because she worried the illness might damage her career, so she kept it private and quietly managed insulin injections between takes while the crew remained unaware. Years passed before she spoke openly about the disease, and by then, the complications had begun to affect her daily life. Her eyesight slowly faded until reading and walking across a room became difficult, and other health problems followed that drained her strength. Still, she continued to appear in public and speak about research funding because she believed progress depended on people refusing to stay silent. Her childhood had already been shaped by hardship. Both of her parents struggled with alcohol, and the tension at home left lasting marks on her sense of security. She often felt she had to beg for attention and approval, and those early wounds stayed with her long into adulthood. Tragedy struck again when her sister died from a drug and alcohol overdose. And not long afterward, Moore faced her own battle with addiction, as drinking began to fill the empty spaces left by stress and loss. The deepest loss came in 1980, when her son Richie died in a gun accident at the age of 24. The shock of losing him left her overwhelmed with guilt and grief, and for a time, she felt lost inside her own life. Eventually, she sought treatment and began rebuilding piece by piece, choosing sobriety and finding steadiness in creative work and quiet routines that helped her move forward. Her marriage to Grant Tinker had once seemed strong as they built a successful production company together, yet over time, the pressure of work and personal struggles pulled them apart. Arguments became common, and distance grew between them until they finally separated and divorced. Afterward, she lived alone for a while, trying to rebuild a sense of balance that had slipped away during those difficult years. In 2003, Mary Tyler Moore sat down for an interview while promoting her reunion project, The Gin Game, with Dick Van Dyke. They had come back together after many years, and people were already feeling nostalgic about seeing them side by side again. During that conversation, Mary said something no one expected. She was 67 then, married to Dr. Robert Levine for almost 20 years, living a steady and settled life. Yet she suddenly admitted, very calmly, that she and Dick Van Dyke had never had an affair. Then she added that she always thought it was a terrible waste. The words landed with quiet force because everyone already knew how strong their connection had been. Back in the early 60s, they played Rob and Laura Petrie on The Dick Van Dyke Show, a married couple who felt so natural together that millions of viewers believed in them completely. At the height of the show, more than 20 million people tuned in each week. They watched the two of them dance around the living room, tease each other with quick jokes, and move through scenes with an easy rhythm that never looked forced. For years, fans wondered if something real existed behind that warmth. Mary's words did not confirm a secret romance, but they revealed that the feeling had been there all along. Dick Van Dyke did not seem shocked when she said it. He had spoken before about having a real crush on her during those years. He was 12 years older, already married, already a father, and she was still finding her place in the business when they first met. In 1961, the network tested dozens of actresses before choosing Mary for the role of Laura Petrie. From the moment she walked in, something clicked. Their partnership began on that day and lasted long after the cameras stopped rolling in 1966. Years before the 2003 interview, the same quiet truth had almost surfaced during a conversation on Larry King Live. The two of them sat next to each other in the studio in the late 1990s, relaxed but aware that people still cared about their story. At one point, Mary spoke again about how nothing had ever happened between them and hinted that she saw it as a missed chance. Dick did not interrupt or laugh it off. He simply listened and gave a small nod, as if he understood exactly what she meant. Their eyes met for a moment, and it felt less like a public interview and more like a private memory being shared in front of millions of viewers. There was no drama in that silence. It felt gentle and honest, the kind of honesty that only comes after many years. Both of them were older by then, both already legends in their own way, and neither seemed interested in hiding the past. Dick later said their connection still felt fresh whenever they met again, almost like no time had passed at all. That sense of closeness without explanation made people even more curious about what might have been. The truth was simpler than the rumors. During the years of the show, both of them lived within strong boundaries. Mary married Grant Tinker not long after the series began, and she held tightly to the values she had grown up with. Dick was already married to Margie Willett and raising 4 children. They worked long days at the studio, often starting early in the morning with script readings and rehearsals that filled nearly every hour. Even when late rewrites kept them working into the night, they stayed focused on the job. They believed in keeping their personal lives separate from the characters they played. Mary later said they never crossed the line because they cared too much about what they had built together. Dick said the same thing in his own way, explaining that they were professionals first. Their discipline kept the partnership steady, and that steadiness helped create performances that still felt alive years later. Awards followed, and so did recognition, but the quiet respect between them mattered more than anything else. When they reunited again in 2003 for television appearances promoting the gin game, the comfort between them was obvious. They joked easily, finished each other's thoughts, and slipped into familiar rhythms without effort. At one point, Dick said it felt like they had just seen each other yesterday, and Mary laughed in that warm way audiences remembered so well. There was no tension left by then, only a deep understanding shaped by decades of shared history. Behind the scenes, Dick's own life had been far from simple. His marriage struggled through the years of his growing fame, and his battle with alcohol made things even harder at home. The problems were already taking shape, while the television show was still on the air, even though few people knew it. Later, he admitted to mistakes and long periods of guilt that followed him for years. By the time his marriage finally ended, both he and Mary had already moved into different lives and different commitments. So the chance that fans imagined never came at the right moment. During the early years, they were too committed to their families and their work. Later, they were tied to new lives and new responsibilities. Time kept moving, and the story stayed unfinished. In the end, Mary's quiet confession in 2003 felt less like regret and more like honesty. It was the last time she spoke so openly about that part of her life, and the words seemed to close a chapter that had remained unspoken for decades. What stayed behind was not scandal or heartbreak, but a bond that lasted through marriages, careers, struggles, and long stretches of time. People kept watching their old scenes and wondering about the space between fiction and reality. Yet the truth was always right there in front of them. Sometimes the strongest connections are the ones that remain untouched, living on only in memory and in the work that brought two people together in the first place.